Hey gang, Spacetime Badass here. So earlier this year I made a video about my beliefs, informing you guys that my beliefs had changed since I first started this channel 5 years ago. If you look back through some of my older stuff, you'll find such gems as the Silver Cord Confirmed and Blurred Lines, Lucid Dreams, or OBE. My point of view in those videos versus the point of view that I have now are as different as night and day. Simply put, these videos embarrass me. When I look back on these, I cringe in horror. But of course I have control over their visibility. Why don't I just take them down? The reason I keep them up is because I want to show that anyone is capable of being misled or deceiving themselves. I fell for the metaphysical narrative hook, line, and sinker. I believed that the universe was conscious back then, I believed that out-of-body experiences were occurring literally outside of the body, and I was afraid of reincarnation because the thought of being forced to live again seemed incredibly inhumane to me. I tell you this to paint a picture and to show you that I understand the spiritual side of things. Before taking this topic on, I felt I had to inform you that I am not coming from a place of not understanding the esoteric perspective. I was the embodiment of that perspective. I had read several books on OBEs and witchcraft by the time I was 12. I tried out every religion I could find to see if there was anything to it during my teens. I played with Ouija boards for years and even experienced a psychosomatic twitch from my belief in it. I've done psychedelics, I've had out-of-body experiences, and so on. I'm not an outsider in this topic. I was steeped in it. I've experienced many things that would make most people believe in the metaphysical or paranormal. The difference is that I put all of these beliefs to the test and eventually realized the truth, that they were all occurring in the mind. So please understand that I am not some logical, scientific person who never gave spirituality a chance. I am a logical and scientific person because I gave it a chance, and more so because I did my homework, and when there wasn't a study I could find, I tested it myself by applying the scientific method. And anyone watching this can do the same. That's why I'm making this video, to encourage others to test these things for themselves, not to simply have the experience, but to try to get to the bottom of the nature of these experiences. I don't want others to waste their time like I did. Time is the most precious thing there is. So, with that out of the way, I'm going to respond to some points Koi Fresco has made on astral projection. It's kind of a pet peeve of mine that lucid dreamers, out-of-body experiencers, and astral projectors are all isolating themselves in separate camps when they're essentially talking about the same experience. I'm sure that simple statement has already made a few of you uneasy, but even if I grant that they are separate experiences, that doesn't mean that astral projections and OBEs are actually occurring outside of the mind. And, since this video might attract some of Koi's followers, I find it important to state the reasons why I chose Koi's videos. First, because of his fans. He has many. Hundreds of thousands of people who I believe are actively being misled. Since I believe that charlatanry is wrong, of course I would like to get my ideas in front of as many of his followers as possible. Second, I chose Koi's videos because he talks about lucid dreaming, as I do on my channel, and I've disagreed with some of the things he has said on this in the past, especially with the idea that astral projections and lucid dreams are separate. And the third reason I chose Koi is because I think his videos display a pretty common point of view on this issue, so I found it a perfect case in point. So, without further ado, let's begin. The first thing to understand about Koi Fresco's approach to this subject is that he used to be a man of science, but let's have him say that in his own words.
I was a very scientific person in my life, very atheistic, very not open to any spiritual aspect for a long time until I had my first astral projection. And when I did, I literally broke down and cried at how amazing it was because there's no scientific way to explain what is happening. It is simply something that is incomprehensible until you do it. And it completely changed my entire life.
So in that clip there are two things that stick out to me. Number one is that Koi says that there is no scientific way to explain what happened to him, and two, as a result, it changed his life. Of course, I don't want to belittle someone for having a life-changing experience. If I experienced something that could not be scientifically explained, I would call it life-changing too. But is there really no scientific way to explain it? And failing that, is there at least not a rational way to explain it? I think there is. And I know what you're thinking, this guy is just taking something Koi said in one of his videos out of context and judging him on it. And you might be right. But for your consideration, I'm putting the links down below in the description box for you to see all of the videos I'm responding to. But surely he hasn't claimed that there's literally no way for science to test or explain astral projection more than once, right?
I went the complete opposite of religion and became 100% scientific, very logical. And when you realize that you can experience something that is beyond the realms of a scientific study, of testing, of proving essentially, it overwhelms you.
Oh, it seems that this must really be what Koi believes. Listen, just because there isn't a study that objectively proves that you aren't leaving your body when you astral project, doesn't mean that you are. Being unable to prove a negative does not make the asserted claim true by default. Since this is such a subjective experience, I think the only way that someone could find the truth at this point is to test it themselves. Simply having an astral projection is not proof. This could still be occurring in your mind. The proof would be astral projecting and gaining information that you would have not otherwise known, and then showing that that information is correct. What I recommend is the following experiment. Sit at a table with a set of crowns and a sheet of paper. Empty the crown box on the table and close your eyes. Then mix up the crowns, keeping your eyes closed, and select one. Once you've picked a crown, keep your eyes closed and make a scribble on the paper. Then turn away from the sheet of paper and open your eyes, making sure not to let yourself look at the marks on the sheet. Then, without knowing what the color is on the paper, go into the other room and astral project. Once you're out of body, go and look at the color of the crown on the paper. Once you have this information, come back to your body and then write down on a separate sheet of paper what color it was, and then check the marks in the physical and see if you got the color right. Then do this experiment as many times as you can. How often do you reliably ascertain the color of the scribble? My guess is you'll get the same result I got when I did this very thing. Wait, what? That's not how astral projection works, you say? Well, isn't that convenient? I think that alone is enough to show you how to debunk astral projection on your own, but something else to consider? What about ketamine? Ketamine is an anesthetic that often gives people the experience of leaving their body. If we can introduce a chemical to someone's brain that gives them the experience of leaving their body, isn't it a reasonable conclusion to say that it's dependent upon the person's brain rather than they're actually leaving their body? Lucid dreaming and astral projection are, to my mind, the same thing.
I just want to clarify for everyone who's curious, lucid dreaming is not astral projection. Astral projection is not lucid dreaming. I have done both, and so I know from my personal subjective experience that they are two different things with a much different way to get to and a much different way of understanding.
Oh, that's weird, because I've had several astral projections and lucid dreams as well, and I got the exact opposite result, not just from my subjective experience, but from logically testing it as well. Suppose you must have left that step out then, huh? Alright, go on then, entertain me. What makes the two so different?
Astral projection is not easy. It is much more tedious and time consuming and takes much more effort than lucid dreaming does.
Okay, so apparently astral projection is harder than lucid dreaming. I'd have to say that I disagree. In fact, I would have to say that astral projection is exactly as hard as it is to achieve a wake-induced lucid dream, and they even share the exact same process.
They are two different things with a much different way to get to and a much different way of understanding.
Oh wait, yeah, I guess you did say that already. Why don't you tell me the process for astral projection and we'll compare it to the process for wild?
Make sure you are relaxed. Make sure it is quiet and that you are comfortable.
Alright, sounds pretty standard so far.
Do this in the early morning. Do not do this before bed. It won't work. You'll fall asleep. Or if you want to do this after sleep, make sure you get at least 3 or 4 hours of sleep before you attempt this.
Okay, you're talking about wake back to bed, the common lucid dreaming practice. Part of why wake back to bed works is because the last 4 hours of sleep have more REM stage sleep than the first 4 hours of sleep. Basically, you're saying that this won't work if you try it before going to sleep because it takes approximately 90 minutes for your first REM cycle to start. Whereas with wake back to bed, you're more likely to go directly into a REM state dream when you go back to bed. And this is true even after a full night's sleep. Yeah, that's exactly like wild so far.
Start to slowly just breathe and focus on your breathing for about 5 to 10 minutes.
It's well known that meditation does positively impact lucid dreaming, and I think this is because the more aware you are in waking life, the more aware you seem to become in your dreams. Meditation is a very common thing for lucid dreamers to do during their wake back to bed for this reason.
You will need to do something called visualization, and that means you have to visualize a rope hanging above you. This is why it's called the rope method, because it involves a rope. Visualize your arms coming up and pulling on this astral rope and pulling your astral body out of your physical.
Okay, I think the rope is the first slight variation on the technique for astral projection. But a point of focus is also necessary for wild. You have to have something to focus on to consciously transition into sleep. Usually, people choose to focus on their breath, but imagining climbing a rope is just a good point of focus as any. It doesn't really matter what you focus on or imagine as long as you stay still and remain conscious as you transition into sleep. I think people assume that the exit experience of an astral projection is somehow proof that it isn't a lucid dream for whatever reason, but you can still have the experience of leaving your body during a lucid dream. Doesn't this make it seem more likely that the rope climbing mechanism simply keeps you aware as your body goes to sleep and then you wild into a dream about leaving your body? If you're not convinced, you may be neglecting a very powerful concept to lucid dreaming. That is, your expectations seem to be the key to dream control. In a lucid dream, your thoughts, attitudes, and intentions can affect the outcome of the dream. If you attempt to leave your body in a lucid dream, you will if you believe it can happen. And if you don't believe me, you can try it. This still seems very much like something that could be happening in the brain to me. If, by your standards, lucid dreams and astral projections are not the same thing, why do they follow the same process? Furthermore, is there anything that can happen in an astral projection that couldn't happen just as convincingly in a lucid dream? I ask this rhetorically because I've already tested this for myself. And if you want an answer, I'd recommend you do the same.
What's happening while you visualize your astral body being pulled out of your physical body is your body is falling asleep physically. It's going through a hypnagogic state of wakefulness to sleep, and that is what you are trying to stay conscious between that's happening. Enter and pass this hypnagogic state while you are pulling on this rope. This is the hardest part of astral projection.
Okay, so here he makes a reference to the hypnagogic state, and on this I think his description is pretty spot on. That is exactly what's happening with an astral projection, just like it's exactly what's happening with a wake-induced lucid dream. The hypnagogic state is full of visual, auditory, and even other sensory hallucinations. This is why people report what they call the vibratory stage, which is auditory hallucinations and other sensory hallucinations. Since this is happening in the hypnagogic state, we know objectively that these are hallucinations. And when you stay conscious past the hypnagogic state, you end up in a lucid dream. Koi has basically admitted that astral projections are precisely lucid dreams with that last clip. Simply put, there is no fundamental difference between these two processes, so why do you assume that they're separate experiences? I'm willing to accept that maybe Koi knows something that I don't. He did say that this experience changed the entire course of his life, so surely he wouldn't have taken the experience itself as proof. I would think he would have tested this extensively himself before reaching that conclusion, right?
I thought it was all complete bullshit because if religion's fake, then this must be fake too, and the only other outcome that's left is complete science. It's absolute logic and reasoning and definitive answers we can test in the lab.
Right, yeah, I agree. So what gives?
The metaphysical side of things started to creep up in the information I was reading and doing research on and watching documentaries on. And so I decided, well, alright, I'll try it.
Alright, always good to put something to the test before we base our beliefs on it, right?
And I think the biggest turning point in my life definitely happened when I was 19 on this journey, because it was the first time I successfully astral projected. I knew that what I had just experienced was beyond the limits of science that we have reached thus far. And this, to me, was the key to taking a whole new journey in life.
Oh, you didn't even test it? You simply had an experience that could have happened just as easily in your mind, and yet you didn't even test it. I mean, sure, you can't prove the negative that astral projections aren't you actually leaving your body, but we've already reasonably discussed that astral projections have no major difference in the process from a wake-induced lucid dream. Doesn't it require a lot more assumptions to believe that it's actually you leaving your body? Just by using Occam's razor, you could see that the simpler and thus more likely explanation is that it's just a lucid dream. And even though we can't necessarily prove that people aren't leaving their body, you can easily test this and find the truth for yourself by using the experiment that I described earlier. I'm simply appalled that Koi could actually base his beliefs on an emotion rather than evidence. Not to mention the fact that he's spreading this misinformation to hundreds of thousands of people simply because he didn't think it was worth his time to see if his belief was accurate or not. So, Koi, how do you justify this to yourself?
It opens a whole new doorway to learning. And you get more curious. You're not scared anymore. You're not worried about what if this happens or what if this happens or I don't understand this. You become okay with not understanding. You become okay with confusion. And that is the beauty of this practice.
I see. Well, that's a very disconcerting view to hold. So, if I am to understand you correctly, Koi, You believe that there is beauty in accepting your own confusion and misunderstanding. As well, you feel that this actually somehow opens you up to learning? I am sorry, but that is completely repulsive to me. Anyone who tells you not to use your mind is not only holding you back, but they're insulting your intelligence. I couldn't imagine simply being completely confused by something and then having no concern for understanding it properly and no desire to even try. Simply put, this is anti-intellectualism, and it is completely lazy. By submitting to confusion, you refuse to even try to use your mind. To quote Sam Harris, "Our minds are all we have. They are all we have ever had, and they are all we can offer others." So, Koi, what can you really offer others with a mindset like that? If you don't even care enough to use your own mind, why would you even think about trying to teach the minds of others? Let alone offering counseling and advice services on your website for $40 for a 15-minute Skype call or $20 for a single email from you? Have you even been trained in counseling? Ultimately, Koi, I don't expect you to change your perspective, and I don't expect you to even actually try to engage with the points I've made in this video. If you respond at all, I expect you to simply apologize that I don't like your views, as I've seen you do on other people's videos. Probably add some trope about peace and love and top it off with the cherry that is Ram Ram. Anything that you can do to respond and maintain your professional persona, even if it means your response is completely detached with the points that I've made in this video. And from what I've seen, I couldn't expect anything more genuine than that from you. As you and I are both keenly aware, Koi, your job security is directly dependent upon the beliefs you hold and the perspectives you put forth. In order to keep earning a living, you are required not to use your mind to consider my perspective. In the event that you actually did, you might find that you would be forced to live a lie in order to keep a roof over your head. And, as they say, ignorance is bliss, isn't it? But alas, Koi, this video is not for you. I'm not interested in attempting to convince a man of reason who is completely comfortable with confusion and misunderstanding when it comes to the nature of reality. This video is for your impressionable viewers who overpay you for a single email or a moment of your time, who donate their hard-earned money to you on Patreon, and whose precious time on Earth you waste by simply being comfortable with spreading your own ignorance. I don't think you're a bad person, but they say that the road to hell is paved with good intentions. I think for the most part you're being genuine with what you believe, but you simply fail to see how you're causing any harm. And I'm sure it's hard to see that with so many people praising you and thanking you for helping them. And I'm sure you have helped a large number of these people, but the thing is, people can still feel like they're being helped even when they're being deceived. This is how mediums and fortune tellers have made a living for thousands of years. Their clients feel like they're being helped until they find themselves bankrupt from paying an arm and a leg for 100% grade A bullshit. In the end, I don't expect you to change, and hey, that's your prerogative. I just wish you wouldn't drag down your viewers with you. I'd also like to say that I don't think everything you do is harmful. Namely, you seem to know a lot about meditation, and I think that's great. I think you would make a great meditation instructor, but meditation doesn't really require any form of esoteric belief to work. And if it can be taught and learned just as effectively with a secular perspective, why add in the metaphysical nonsense in the first place? But I guess it sells better that way, doesn't it? I expect to get a lot of hate from your followers by posting this video, from those who adore and idolize you, from people who won't even watch this video but simply give it a thumbs down because I've dared to speak critically of you, to people who will watch every second of this but still fail to understand why it's important that they test your claims for themselves. So, for those of you who might have some choice words for me but who lack the initiative to actually search for the truth on their own, this video isn't for you either. You can stay asleep. I put zero stock in the opinions of people who refuse to even try to think critically. And before you get to typing away about how close-minded I must be, I'd like to point out that requiring evidence does not make you close-minded. In fact, it's quite the opposite. Requiring evidence means that we must be open to whatever that evidence might be, so that way we can change our perspective of reality accordingly. So if you have a knee-jerk reaction to what I say and refuse to test it for yourself, well, you have to ask, who is really being close-minded here? Alright, that's all for now. Take care.